Hi and welcome to the Bible channel. Discover the amazing truth behind one of the Bible's most mysterious figures, Balaam, the prophet who tried to curse God's people but ended up blessing them instead. This deep dive into the story reveals powerful lessons about greed, deception, and divine intervention that still apply today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
This is the fourth talk in our series on archaeology and the Bible. Having looked at Joseph, the Exodus, and the Red Sea crossing, we now move to that time towards the end of the 40 years in the wilderness and just prior to the children of Israel entering the Promised Land. We previously established that the Exodus occurred in 1446 BC, and so the entering of the Promised Land would be in 1406 BC. And so this incident occurs most likely around 1407 BC. They are encamped in the plains of Moab, and we come across our encounter with Balaam, the son of Beor. And I say our encounter because when we read the recorded story about him, what he does seems to happen in the background. It would appear that Israel at this point are unaware and for the most part, initially, unaffected by what happens with Balaam. And he is a strange and rather mysterious character and somewhat difficult to interpret or fully understand. So before we begin, let's read Numbers chapter 22 and verses 1 to 6, where we get our first introduction to this strange figure. So picking up the record, Numbers 22, beginning in verse 1, Then the people of Israel set out and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho. And Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was in great dread of the people, because they were many. Moab was overcome with the fear of the people of Israel, and Moab said to the elders of Midian, This horde will now lick up all that is around us, as the ox licks up the grass of the field. So Balak, the son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the people of Amor, to call him, saying, Behold, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the earth, and they are dwelling opposite me. Come now, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. Now the main narrative regarding Balaam occurs in Numbers and is allocated a full 3 chapters, chapters 22, 23, and 24. So it is clearly an important account, and God expects us to learn a great deal from it. Now the interesting part is that to a large degree, Balaam is presented in these 3 chapters as neither a friend nor an enemy of Israel. But as we will see, there is more at play than just what transpired in these 3 chapters. So, what do we know about Balaam? Well, firstly, he is a foreign prophet, and yet God speaks through him, and he gives him 4 oracles. And we see these in Numbers 23 and 24. Secondly, he is, however, also a diviner, or what was called a buru, which was a priest diviner who specialized in working enchantments, auguries, sorceries, and any kind of divining necessary. The buru didn't consider themselves linked to any one god, but to all and every god. They would work for or against any god for a price. And the record is very clear to inform us of the fact that Balaam practiced divination. We read in Numbers 22 verse 7, So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination in their hand, and they came to Balaam and gave him Balak's message. In Joshua 13 verse 22, we read there, Balaam also, the son of Beor, the one who practiced divination. Now, divination was a practice expressly forbidden by God. We read in Deuteronomy 18 and verses 9 to 10, when you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominable practices of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination. And notice that God places practicing divination right up there with sacrificing your children to false gods. Now, people often think that because God clearly spoke through Balaam, that he was a Jewish prophet. But God is telling us he would never tolerate, as one of his prophets, someone who practiced divination. But that does not stop God from using a false prophet in order to further his objectives and give us messages or oracles. Thirdly, his name Balaam means destroyer of people. And he most likely acquired this name due to his success in cursing people, leading presumably to their destruction. He most likely came from a family of soothsayers who specialized in blessings and cursings. And he would have needed to have been very well read and up to date with the various goings-on in the region. And this would enable his, and I'll put it in inverted commas, predictions to be based on reading how events were playing out and then choosing his side very carefully. He must have been highly successful at what he did and was probably considered the best in the region. His services probably didn't come cheaply, but his reputation was clearly why he was so sought after by Balak. Fourthly, he was from Aram, and we are told in his first oracle, Numbers 23 verse 7, from Aram Balak has brought me, the king of Moab, from the eastern mountains. Our fifth point, he lived in a town called Pethor, which is near the river in the land of Ammon. And we read that Balak sent messages to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the people of Ammon. Point 6, we're also told that Pethor was located in Mesopotamia. In Deuteronomy 23 verse 4, because they hired against you Balaam, the son of Beor, from Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse you. Point 7, he was clearly not a righteous prophet and was motivated and driven by money. He was a prophet for hire. We read in Nehemiah chapter 13 verse 2 of Balak that he hired Balaam against them to curse them. Also in 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 15, they have followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved gain from wrongdoing. And so we see this in his repeated attempts to want to fulfill Balak's wishes and to curse Israel. Our eighth point, God uses him to show his love and mercy for Israel. In Deuteronomy 23 verse 5, but the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam. Instead, the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord your God loved you. And then in Micah chapter 6 verse 5, O my people, remember what Balak king of Moab devised, and what Balaam the son of Beor answered him, and what happened from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the righteous acts of the Lord. Point 9, God uses the opportunity to turn the curse into a blessing. Nehemiah 13 verse 2, yet our God turned the curse into a blessing. And in point 10, Peter terms Balaam's actions in trying to go against God as madness. In 2 Peter 2 verse 16, a speechless donkey spoke with a human voice and restrained the prophet's madness. Now, if all we were told about Balaam was the account in Numbers 22 to 24, we might walk away having a bit of a mixed view on him. He gives these amazing prophecies or oracles, and the fourth one in particular is a prophecy concerning the coming of the Messiah. In Numbers 24 verses 17 to 19, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the forehead of Moab and break down all the sons of Sheth. Edom shall be dispossessed. Seir also, his enemies, shall be dispossessed. Israel is doing valiantly, and one from Jacob shall exercise dominion and destroy the survivors of cities. And note the reference to a star, taking us to Matthew chapter 2, verse 2, where we read, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." And yes, we see his continued attempts to try to fulfill his deal with Balak and curse Israel. But chapter 24 ends with, in verse 25, "Then Balaam rose and went back to his place, and Balak also went his way." And so at this point we might conclude that he backs off on the deal and returns home. But that is not the case. And he initiates something prior to his departure and most likely continues to orchestrate this plan, which has a devastating effect on Israel and leads ultimately to the death of 24,000 people. The next chapter, 25, is all a consequence of advice given to Balak by Balaam prior to his departure. In effect, what Balaam says to Balak is that I am unable to curse them. God will not allow me to. But if you want to get at them, weaken and undermine them, you have to get them to act in a way that goes against the very core of their worship of God. And that, remember, is what the world and the environment we live in is trying to do to us. Undermine our worship and relationship with God and His Son. Drive a wedge between us. And now you can begin to see why God assigned so many chapters to this account. Just think of Paul's words to the Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 11. Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come. Reading between the lines, Balak, the king of Moab, under the instruction and advice of Balaam, sends women from Moab to entice the children of Israel to worship and sacrifice to Baal and carry out religious fornication. And so in Numbers 25, we have the outcome of Balaam's advice to Balak, and the chapter is titled Baal Worship at Peor. And just look at God's view of this incident in Numbers 25 and verse 3 to 4. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, take all the chiefs of the people and hang them in the sun before the Lord, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. From this account, I think we can conclude that God is seriously livid. This whole saga got so bad that at one point, an Israelite prince, Zimri, son of Zalu, publicly fornicated with a Midianite princess named Cosbi, daughter of Zur, in the name of some kind of fertility rite. And apparently these rituals were drawing big crowds until Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the high priest, picked up a spear and killed Zimri and Cosbi. This act ended Balaam's attempt to subvert Israel through pagan religious sex rituals. And we are told of this in Revelation chapter 2 and verse 14. We read there, but I have a few things against you. You have some there who hold the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel so that they might eat food sacrificed to idols and practice sexual immorality. And in Numbers 31 verse 16, behold, these, on Balaam's advice, caused the people of Israel to act treacherously against the Lord in the incident of Peor, and so the plague came among the congregation of the Lord. And God would not let this act of Balaam's go unpunished, and he is eventually killed for his actions. We read of this in Joshua 13 verse 22. Balaam also, the son of Beor, the one who practiced divination, was killed with the sword by the people of Israel among the rest of their slain. So before we look into Balaam's encounter with Balak, I just want to mention some points regarding Balaam's hometown and where people believe he actually came from. So where are we told that he came from? Well, we told he's an Armenian from the town of Pethor, so he's not a Moabite. Now, Pethor was generally thought to be the ancient Armenian city of Pitru in northern Syria, nearly 640 kilometers from where he goes to meet Balak. And remember that Balak sends princes to call Balaam twice, meaning that each round trip was nearly 1,300 kilometers. In those days, it would have taken forever. And in this map, we find them depicting Pethor as being located on the edge of the Euphrates River, probably due to the reference in Numbers 22 verse 5 of Pethor being near the river. But we are not told here what river this is actually referring to. And we will return to the more likely location of Pethor a bit later when we look at archaeological evidence that has been uncovered and which suggests a very different and more logical location. So we return to the narrative where Balaam is told by God to go and meet Balak because God plans to use the opportunity to bless Israel. So Balaam travels down to Moab and meets with Balak. And during this period, we have God speaking to Balaam and the incident with the angel and the donkey speaking. Balak and Balaam meet, and we read of this in Numbers 22 verse 36, at the city of Moab on the border formed by the Arnon, which is the modern-day Wadi al-Mujib in Jordan. And at this point, the children of Israel are camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho. From there, they travel to Kirith Huzoth, where Balak sacrifices some oxen and sheep, verse 40. From there, they travel to Bamoth Baal, where they are only able to see a fraction of the people, verse 41. Balaam gets Balak to make further offerings in chapter 23 in verses 1 to 6, and God gets Balaam to give the first oracle in verses 7 to 10. From there, they travel to the field of Zophim, the top of Pisgah. This is in verse 14 of 23, and again, they are still only able to see a fraction of them, we read in verse 13. Balak makes further offerings in verses 14 to 17, and God gets Balaam to give the second oracle in verses 18 to 24. And from there, they travel to the top of Beor, verse 28. Balaam gets Balak to make further offerings again, verses 29 to 30, and from here they could fully see Israel camping in the plains of Moab, tribe by tribe, we read in verse 2 of chapter 24. And God gets Balaam to give the third oracle, verses 3 to 9. Now in this Google map, you can see the view they would have had from the top of Beor, looking out over the plains of Moab, across the Jordan Valley, across the Jordan River, all the way to Jericho. And I've drawn this side profile following that yellow line, and it also gives you a very good idea of their uninterrupted view and the profile of the land going all the way down to the River Jordan. And this here is an actual photo taken from this point, looking out across the valley towards Jericho on the other side of the Jordan. This is exactly what Balak and Balaam would have seen with Israel camping in the plains of Moab. And then finally, unable to get Balaam to curse Israel, Balak is livid, and Balaam concurs that he is unable to do this because God won't let him. And God then gets Balaam to give the fourth oracle in verses 15 to 24. And finally, when Balaam leaves Balak in Numbers 24 verse 25, we are told that he went back to his place. And we would have to assume that this is back to Pethor, and it clearly must be close enough to enable him to orchestrate the use of Moabite prostitutes to turn many of the children of Israel and corrupt them from within. The apparent amicable way in which Balak and Balaam seem to part lends more weight to the idea that it was not only close by, but that they stayed in contact. Balaam, after all, was determined to earn his money. Further to this, we are told quite specifically in Numbers 31 that Balaam is killed after God instructs Moses to take vengeance on the Midianites. In Numbers 31 verses 1 to 8 we read, "The Lord spoke to Moses saying, 'Avenge the people of Israel on the Midianites. And further along, they killed the kings of Midian and the rest of their slain, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, and the 5 kings of Midian. And they also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, with a sword. Now the territory of the Midianites was more southeast of Israel, even south of Edom. And you wonder, how was it possible during this campaign for Balaam to be killed, presumably back at home in Bethel? Maybe he was back to his tricks and consulting for the Midianites this time. But time-wise, this would have to be around 1407 BC, just prior to Moses' death and the children of Israel, you recall, entering the land in 1406 BC. We then have the strange detail in Joshua 13 when it appears as if during Joshua's campaigns, specifically while conquering the territory given to Reuben, which consisted mostly of Amorite territory, so the area north of the valley of Arnon, and we pick this up in Joshua chapter 13 and verses 15 to 23, that Balaam is mentioned being killed. In verse 22, Balaam also, the son of Beor, the one who practiced divination, was killed with the sword by the people of Israel among the rest of their slain. However, it is quite possible that in dealing with the various nations defeated by Joshua on the east of the Jordan, so Moabite, Ammonite, Amorite areas, that because of the influence Balaam had amongst these nations, we are being reminded of the fact that he was killed by the sword because of the continued influence he had in this region in working with not just Balak, but others as well. One of the towns that was located in Amorite territory and became part of Gad was Succoth, located at the edge of the central Jordan Valley near the Jabbok River, and it functioned as a trade hub and religious sanctuary during this time. And here in 1967, there was a remarkable discovery made by some Dutch archaeologists in a place called Deir Allah. And what they discovered was some kind of pagan house of worship or seminary. And on its walls, there was a 2,800-year-old inscription in black ink. Key phrases are highlighted in red ink, and the whole writing is framed in red. And as it turns out, this is the oldest Aramaic inscription ever found. The inscription is 600 to 800 years older than the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the inscription mentions a prophet or a seer named Balaam, son of Beor, the exact same name and description as mentioned in Numbers 22. This is the only instance where a specific individual mentioned in the story of the biblical Exodus can be pointed to in archaeology. And when we look up Deir Allah in Google Maps, we locate it here just east of the Jordan River, shown in yellow, close to the Jabbok River, which feeds into the Jordan. So it is on or near the border of ancient Israel, exactly where you would expect to find it given the biblical narrative. The people who wrote it must have been Balaam's people, meaning to them he was a hero, not a villain. And so the story told by them would be the opposite of what we read of him in the Bible. But there is this clear, letter-perfect synchronicity between archaeology and the Bible. And what is also important to note is that according to Scripture, Balaam was a prophet. God spoke through him, and much of his oracles or prophecies have already come to pass, especially as we saw concerning Jesus. But this inscription confirms independently that he was regarded as a prophet. According to Numbers 22 verse 9 and 20, he receives visions or messages from God at night. The inscription says he received visions at night. Clearly from Numbers, he has some sort of dialogue with God, and the inscription says that he speaks to the gods. Balaam also refers to God as El, as we find in Numbers 23 verse 8. The name of God mentioned in the inscriptions is also El. What is further mentioned in the inscriptions is a reference to a girl or priestess who is used for the purpose of making one saturated with love. linking Numbers 25 and Revelation 2, we clearly see that Balaam used religious fornication to seduce and corrupt Israel. And the amazing irony is that these fragments of plaster containing the inscription about Balaam have been removed from Deir Allah and housed in the Museum of Ammon in Jordan, literally 6 meters from a fragment of the Dead Sea Scrolls that record the account of Balaam. Looking at the archaeological site, we can see the location of the Tell of Deir Allah. And if we zoom in, we can see the actual mound of the Tell. And from above, we see it's about 50 by 200 meters, and it rises to 27 meters above the plain. And it's on top of this mound or this Tell that archaeologists uncovered the building or sanctuary with these plaster fragments. And what they also discovered is that the building had been destroyed by a large earthquake. And dating in the ruins puts the destruction at around the end of the 9th or first half of the 8th century BC. And scholars feel that this could in fact be the earthquake mentioned in Amos chapter 1 and verse 1, which is dated to the first half of the 8th century BC. And evidence of this earthquake has also been found at several other sites in the region, including Jerusalem. Now, in excavating this ruin, a pile of fragments were found, 119 pieces, and these were inscribed with black and red ink. And it seems to have been part of one long column with at least 50 lines on a plastered wall. And the lower part of the texts showed signs of wear, indicating that it had been on the wall for quite an extended period of time prior to the earthquake. And so people and maybe animals brushing past that wall had slowly worn away the lower parts of the text. And given the inscription's date, location, and content, there's little doubt that its main character can be identified with the Balaam, son of Beor, known from the Bible. Now, Deir Allah is the 8th century BC. In the 8th century BC was a large city, perhaps even a center of religious instruction. And so coming back to the building remains that they discovered, they found on the walls of a room in one building that may have stood near a temple that a professional scribe had copied the text of an important religious manuscript. And what he did was first he drew 4 red frames as shown in the drawing, and then he filled the frames with text. When the earthquake occurred, the inscribed wall fell, crumbling into a host of smaller fragments that scattered over an area of nearly 2 square meters. And it appears as if most of one section of the wall fell into a pit, and this was termed Combination 1, circled in yellow, and another section fell at the corner of the original wall called Combination 2 in the red circle. And when it was noticed that the plaster fragments had traces of letters written on them, they were carefully gathered up and work began on reconstructing the inscription. Obviously, the fragments were poorly preserved and only a few large sections could be recovered. And after years of work, scholars were able to connect and read 2 large sections of the text, what they called Combination 1 and Combination 2. And it's not known how the original text was placed on the plaster wall, but they have concluded that it was an important inscription and written by a professional scribe. And the inscription's first line references the book of Balaam, which suggests that it was taken from an older text. And it deals with a vision from the gods received by Balaam, son of Beor, a seer of the gods. And it consists of a message warning Balaam of an impending disaster. In addition to the plaster inscriptions that were found, in 1964 they discovered 11 clay tablets. And the tablets were found in the destruction layer of storerooms and were dated to be older than 1200 BC, since they discovered a cartouche of Queen Tuseret of Egypt. And so they could be no later than this period. And earlier objects were also found there, so the tablets clearly predate the destruction. And looking at 2 of the tablets, we uncover some interesting facts. In this tablet, known as Deir Allah number 1449, The translation makes reference to the place being known as Pethor, and that it was attacked by 2 successive waves of attackers. In view of the reference given to Balaam at the site and the added reference to Pethor, we can strongly conclude that Deir Allah is the most likely home and location of the biblical town of Pethor and the place Balaam operated from. Now you recall that Numbers 22 verse 5 referred to Pethor being located near the river being in this case a reference to the Jabbok River rather than the Euphrates. And we note also that it is only just over 80 kilometers from where Balak lived, and so it is far more feasible for those princes of Balak to have traveled there twice rather than 1,300 kilometers round trip to the other proposed location. In this second tablet, known as Deir Allah number 1441, the translation makes reference to one of the attackers being the mighty ones of Pithom. Now, Pithom was one of the 2 major store cities that the Israelites built for Pharaoh in Egypt. What is suggested here is that the reference to the mighty ones of Pithom is actually a reference to the children of Israel who would have left there after the Exodus and became the mighty ones under Joshua as they conquered this and all the other areas of the promised land. So in our conclusion, firstly, the discovery of the Balaam inscriptions in 1967 AD was an amazing find as it once again proved the validity of another Bible story. Secondly, the incredible discovery of not just the 2 sections of the Book of Balaam inscriptions that date to around 750 BC, but from the same site, the 11 tablets that date to somewhere between 1450 and 1200 BC, prove that Balaam was indeed the real person of Numbers chapters 22 to 24. And then thirdly, the 11 tablets have been translated and go a long way to showing that the Tel Deir Allah is in fact Balaam's hometown of Pethor. And this would explain why nearly 650 years after the death of Balaam in 1407 BC, so in 750 BC, he still played a central public role in the town.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment below and let us know what you thought. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please share it and spread the word. Thanks for watching, and remember to come back soon.